Tell me when to go.
Okay. Fellow Toastmasters, I have a story today that I think is going to blow your mind. And the title of my speech is called Now is the Time. And what I want you to think about while you hear all this is what we're here for and to really make the most out of your time here on earth. Because that's what now is the time means to me. Now is the time. I'm just going to start with a story. About 2 years ago, I had recently divorced, and the first person who I dated went on the first date. She's like, yeah, well, my brother actually died 10 years ago, and he haunts me in a good way. Like, he lets me know I'm here. And I thought, that's really interesting. I want to know more. And she's like, well, you know, like, for example, he wrote hi on the window, and she showed me a picture, and hi was written very clearly, hi, in her brother's handwriting, apparently. And I was like, wow, that's quite impressive. And she's like, and get this. I find nickels all over the place. She had a jar full of nickels, like a huge jar. She's like, yeah, every time I throw a dime in the water, I find a nickel within 3 days. I was like, that's really cool. I don't know if I believe or not, but that's really cool. I didn't tell her I didn't believe. I was like, okay, I want to see it happen. So, we dated for a couple weeks, and I'm like, okay, tell your brother that I want to find a nickel. She's like, no, he's not going to give you a nickel. He only gives me nickels. I'm like, ask your brother, but I don't want just a regular nickel because I won't believe if I just find a regular nickel. Ask your brother for a 1982 nickel. She's like, okay, I'll ask, but we'll see what happens. So the very next day, I threw a dime in the water for him. And the very next day, we're going for a walk, and we left her place, and went around the little pond or whatever. We walked back, and I see over in the little crack, there's a crack just like this. There's a penny sticking out, and it was the most demolished, decrepit, ugly penny I've ever seen in my life. Like, it was all scratched up. And I look over to Jen, and I say, hey, Jen, I just noticed that penny over there. I just want to check to see if it's 1982. Why not? She's like, oh, it will be. It's going to be 1982. She was so confident. I'm like, okay, I'll just check. So I pick it up, and it was 1982.
That's not a nickel. You order for a nickel?
I asked for a nickel. She looks at me. I asked for a nickel. Yes, I did. She looks at me. She's like, oh, he doesn't think you're worth a nickel. And she explains how the story, like when she was younger, she used to say to, her brother used to say, her brother was a couple years older, and he'd say, you know what, I'll trade you a dime. You give me a dime, I'll give you a nickel. Nickels are bigger, so it's a great deal. And that was her thing. So he was making the statement, oh, you're not worth even a nickel to me. And because the fact that it was 1982, right after I said, let me just check to see if it's 1982, it gave me the goosebumps, and I was like, wow, he's really... That and a few other things that happened. She had some crazy, crazy stories. So then she was telling me that she lived only 200 yards away from where her brother had died in a car crash. And that she just happened to find this great deal. And she had never gone back, like, to actually see the site that he had died. I was like, well, you got to go, You spent 10 years, you're still having challenge with all this. You should go to see the site. She's like, I'm scared. And I said, well, it's up to you, but you should go do it. So she tells me the next day she walked, the 200 yards. It was really, really close to the site. And she was like, no, I don't want to do it. I'm going to turn around. And at that moment, she looked down on the ground, and there was a little piece of grass, and there was a newspaper clipping. And she took a picture, and she sent it to me. I don't have it anymore. It's on my old camera. But it looked something like this. And it said, now is the time. You can see that. And I don't know if, whatever the newspaper clippings mean, but she interpreted this to be, I bet now's the time to go look at his crash site. So she went. She saw a few pieces of glass still from the accident. And she said it really helped her move forward. So after all this, I was like, well, this is really cool. I had been to see a medium. Her name was Susan Northrup. just for curiosity, I'd heard her on the radio, and I was like, I'm going to check it out. And it came away sort of inconclusive. She seemed to be getting really accurate stuff, but she had a whole audience, so someone's going to raise their hand and say it happened to them. It felt kind of a little bit phony, but other things, like she described somebody flinging pizza in the air, and that person had just done it yesterday. So things like that, I was like, well, that's sort of weird. Like, how did she get that? But anyway, Jen had gone to see the Funny Bone, the comedy club in Manchester, where this woman, Rebecca Ann Losacera, came, and she was a medium. So this was when we were dating. So she went, and she said the whole time this medium was focusing on her and her brother. So I said, you know what, we have to go and see this medium for like a full hour. This is going to be really cool, and I want to see if she's legitimate because I'm really curious about this stuff. And the fact that I had the 1982 penny and all the stories, I'm like, we're going to go. So we went to the medium, and she was in Vernon, nice and close, and I actually recorded it on my phone for an entire hour, and I was amazed at how accurate she was. I actually ended up doing statistics on it later on, because I'm an actuary, and I put down the probability I thought she would get it right, based on what she said, and then whether she got it right or wrong. And some of it was a little bit subjective, but overall, what I concluded was that she should have got right 70 things. She made exactly 100 things in that hour, 100 statements. She should have got right 70 based off the probabilities that I assigned, and I think I was being conservative. She actually got 85 things correct. There were 15 that I thought that she got wrong, but somebody could have said, oh, it wasn't really wrong or whatever. But when I did the math on it and the statistics, it was p is less than 0.01, that she could have gotten 85 of those correct, based on the probabilities that were actually, that I assigned. So I thought that was really, really impressive. But the other interesting thing that happened was we were going to split the cost because it was like $75, and actually I think that was a discounted rate anyway. But we were going to split the cost. But then I was so impressed by this medium, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to pay the whole thing because you went through a lot, and I want to do that for you. So we were walking back to the car, and it was raining, and I noticed in the parking lot the shiniest nickel that I ever seen in my life. It wasn't 1982. It was like 2012, whatever the current year was. But it was a shiny nickel, and I looked at her, and I'm like, I think this is your brother, for me, saying thank you for bringing you here today. They really felt that.
Goosebumps right now.
I know, right? So, fast forward 2 years. Okay, I recently had a son, and it didn't work out with Mom. You don't know her, I think, Lori, but it didn't work out. And I haven't really dated, but my cousin said, you should really meet this coworker of my wife because she's really cool, and I think you guys would get along. So I'm like, okay, I'll go for a date. I find out her name, I find her on Facebook, and stalking her like any good date will do. And I find out that her nephew was one of the people who died in the Sandy Hook. And the way I found it out was that she shared a link. And if you look closely, it's a picture of her brother, and you can't see it, but what it says, and I can pass it around, it says, Daniel Barden, September 27, 2005 to December 14, 2012, honors life, stand with us for change, and it says, now is the time.
Wow, that's a big sign.
And I'm like, now is the time. Wait a second, that is exactly, I remember it saying now is the time 2 years ago when somebody had died. And that's just crazy. Like, I thought, what a coincidence. So then we go on the date, and we're at Bertucci's. And we're talking, yada, yada. And she's like, I don't know what she said before or what she said after, but she's like, and now is the time. I'm like, well, you just said now is the time? And we're like, okay, that has a story to me, and I'm going to explain it later, but I don't think you're ready to hear it yet. And I was just moved by just that one little statement. And people say now is the time all the time, I realize. But that was just too much for me. So I went home, and I think within a week I was telling